What was the most interesting case you had?
It's a really difficult one, you know, because all of them are interesting. Sometimes, you know, the smaller ones are some of the more interesting cases. And I did crime, and all of the criminal cases are interesting in their own way. Every human being, regardless of their background, has a fascinating story, has the threads of a completely interesting tapestry. But you know, you'll be aware, I'm sure, and it won't take much Googling to know that I was involved in a lot of gang cases representing young, chiefly men, who were accused of, and in some cases convicted of, serious gang violence, including murder. Every one of those cases was fascinating. One of the cases I dealt with, a high-profile case of well, it was a shooting outside a hairdresser's on New Year's Eve, where these two unfortunate young women were killed in the crossfire of two gangs competing for a purpose which no doubt they understood, but they released the, well, they deployed, that's not the correct way of putting it, they emptied a semi-automatic weapon at a crowd, and these two young women were killed. My client was accused of starting the chain of events that led to those young women being killed. And I did that case. And the gangs, the Burger Bar and the Johnston crew, were considered to be so seriously violent that the two of the witnesses, at least, who were participating informants, were given police protection for life. But that caused a huge complication in the trial, in that the witnesses in the dock weren't allowed to see their faces or hear their voices. And we as barristers were allowed to see the witnesses, but were specifically injuncted, precluded from revealing anything, any part of the identity which may have led, any information which may have led to the identity of the witnesses giving evidence against our own clients. You think about that and think about the fairness of the proceedings. Actually, the law was subsequently changed. That case was interesting. Cases where subsequently I advised, or as you do, and you listen to the story and you give advice, and a young person will, as a defendant, say, I was acting under duress when I was asked to hold these weapons on behalf of a gang. I can't say who they are. And that young person, who's probably now would be considered to have special educational needs, does give that evidence, and you're his barrister, and you persuade, well, you advise him that that's the truth and he should run that story. And he does run that story, and you make your speech to the jury on the Monday, and he gives evidence persuasively on the day before, and he's acquitted. And then 2 days later, he's shot outside his house. And you know perfectly well that, but for your advice or the decision that he made alongside the counsel that you gave him, he'd still be alive. Or you can see the picture behind me. That's me involved in a trial representing a British soldier accused of killing an Iraqi looter soldier who would have been 18 or 19 at the time. He fought his way into Basra along with his comrades. And the pre-war planning was so bad that they found themselves, these young lads from, again, working class communities that were prepared to risk their lives on all of our behalves, down at the lowest end of the command chain, who were having to be military police under international law with no training whatsoever. So the top brass are writing home and saying, oh, can we shoot looters on sight? We don't know what to do. It's terrible. The situation is really bad. And these men and everybody cultivating strategies to try and stop people looting, because, as I say, they're under an international obligation to restore civil society. So they do a series of things which are dangerous. Amongst them, they wet, as they call local, chiefly men who were looting. They throw them into water because it's going to take 2 days for them to get back into the center of Basra. So they do this to a group of lads, and one of the boys drowns. And the 4 most junior soldiers were accused of manslaughter. Of course, nobody at the top end of the chain, where the chaos really sat, who had overriding responsibility for the whole of the post-war planning in Iraq, was ever brought to book. But the poorest amongst them, the guardsmen, they were. Fascinating case. and a real gift and privilege to be able to do as well.